Welcome to Very Honored Frater PT's Esoterinerd podcast, episode 106, in which I interview Kess Frey for the 6th time. June 6th, episode 106, Kess's 6th interview. My audience will recognize the reference to Tibetan, but if you stumbled here accidentally, you might be thinking of the Book of Revelation. Anyway, I'm not going to do a segment for this one. Kess Frey. Well, if you haven't heard the previous interviews with him, I'll give you a quick rundown. Okay. Once upon a time, in 1919, there was a man named Dan Reib who went to work in Shanghai and spent a lot of time in Western China and, there on the border with Tibet at the time. And he collected a lot of artifacts. Some of them he sent to his sister, but he himself collected some things for himself, and then he passed away in 1946. And those things eventually ended up in the hands of my dad. Anyway, they all of these, some of them actually very ancient, some of them made more recently, all of these Tibetan Buddhist and Chinese Vajrayana, which, believe it or not, actually used to be a thing before the great leap in one direction or the other. Anyway, my dad had them around. At the time, from my understanding, is he was mostly focused on Hermeticism and builders of the Adytum and tarot and stuff. This is 1966. But he had these Tibetan Buddhist statues around. And then one day, through a mutual friend, he met Kess Frey. And Kess Frey came in and saw all these things and said, "Oh my God, you've got Vimala Mitra over here, you've got Green Tara over there, you've got And so my dad, of course, was very interested, and it turned out that Kess had come from a background where he was practicing Tibetan Buddhist, but staying at an ashram where everybody else was Hindu, but he had, he got permission to, practice Tibetan Buddhism there, and yoga in Colorado. And so he had a lot of exposure to that sort of thing. I think he had probably met Chogyam Trungpa. I think he was around. Yeah, he came before 66 to the U.S. Anyway, so they met. They became fast friends. I think they met the Karmapa together. Now, of course, that's not the young man bearing the title today. Well, it is, but it's not the current incarnation. It's the previous incarnation. So they became good friends. Kess dedicated one of his books to my dad. My dad introduced Kess to Hermetic Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. So there was this nice sort of exchange of Tibetan Buddhism and, Hermeticism that ended up being the world in which I was born, that of, my immediate family. So Kess was, he was a big influence on the situation in which I grew up, which then directly informed my path that eventually led me here. So it's, it just seems very beautiful and poetic to me that I'm here in India talking to Kess. And so another thing about Kess was he did an interview with my dad. He interviewed my dad in 1990 on the subject of affective education, and because my dad was an educator, and I'll make that available to you if you'd like. That whole interview, I'll put a link in the description of this episode, but I'll cut to a few portions of that, a few bits from that during the conversation with Kess, and also you'll get to hear from his guru. That's another fun story. Instead of a segment, I'll just finish what I'm saying and then we'll get to the interview. I had all these tapes from my parents. They've both passed away, for people who don't know me well, when I was very young. I mean, a teenager. And I'm in my 40s now, so it's a while ago now. So they had all these cassette tapes, and one of them was this Swami Jyoti, Swami Amar or something, Jyoti. And so I converted it from cassette to audio and then forgot about it, never thought about it again. I didn't know what it was or what its significance was. And so today I was talking to Kess and he mentioned that that was the name of his guru. And I realized that I have a recording of his guru. So I will play portions of that as well during the interview. And what else? I hope you enjoy this episode. I also want to mention that I have a travel series. I don't think I had started that when you heard episode 105. Go to YouTube if you're into it, and just search for Edward Reib. That's Reib. I know I pronounce it wrong if you're German, but that's how we pronounce it here. I'm sorry. And by here I mean Goa. You can pronounce it Reib if you come to Goa. We'll just have to agree to disagree. I know I have some paternal ancestors. Actually, the vast majority of my paternal ancestors probably called it Reib. But anyway, I've gone on about that for too long. So, well, yeah, I think I finished everything. You guys have it all. That's all the information. Oh, yeah, search for Edward Reib, and there's a travel series that I recommend you check out, but I recommend you skip the first 5, at least at first. Unless you know me well or you're really into like gazing at the screen while it shows you things for a long time. If you're into that, start with episode 1. If that doesn't sound appealing to you, start with episode 6, and I swear it's going to be worth your while. And it tells quite a story. Kess and I make reference to the grand journey that I went on when I left California, but you can experience it right there along with me if you just click on part 6 in the travel playlist on the Edward Reib YouTube page, and it'll take you automatically to part 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm working on 11. Also, you can go to YouTube and check out VH Frater BT. So just VH space FRATER space BT. You'll find a lot of those old live ritual postings that I did, those live streams a few years back on Facebook. I'm putting them up on YouTube. There's also, if you're interested, if you're into it, there's the 8-minute hotel room Tridentine Mass that I did here a couple days ago on my retreat. And I recorded it to send to Priel, but I decided to post it publicly. It's sincerely heretical, but orthodox. It's sort of will make anyone uncomfortable. Someone who goes to church will be like, why is he doing the Tridentine Mass on a dresser with, like, while laughing and cracking jokes? And then like the heretics will hear it and be like, why is he chanting, in Tridentine sort of Gregorian styles with such ease? Like, I thought he was cool. So I like to find that zone where I can push one button that, like simultaneously pushes all the buttons. All right. Well, this was a long intro, and I'm okay with that. I hope you are too. All right. So what do you say we get to that interview, shall we? Testing. Hello.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while.
It sure has.
What's new? Sorry about the noise.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm working on a writing project.
That's good.
It's a new adventure almost every day.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about the writing project, or should we keep it quiet until publishing time?
Oh, no, I can tell you a little bit about it. It's something that's been developing spontaneously, as the Spirit guides me. So I get a lot of surprises.
Mm,
'Cause I think I know what I'm going to do, but then I find out I'm going to do something different.
mm,
That's happened several times. The title of the project is Oneness in Contemplation,
mm. And
Centering Prayer and Universal Spirituality.
oneness in contemplation?
Yes.
Okay. Mm,
And then the subtitle is Centering Prayer and Universal Spirituality.
mm. Now, just for the people who, this is your sixth time on the Esoterinerd podcast. But for
Oh,
the
is it? Yeah.
yeah, number six, I think you've been on more than anybody.
Huh.
But for the people who maybe this is their first time hearing your name or hearing, they've never heard Thomas Keating, they've never heard Contemplative Prayer. Can you give us like a couple minute rundown of what it is that you're specializing in and what you became interested in 1989 and where that led you?
Well, yeah, I'll try to do it in 2 minutes.
Or 5, 10. No rush.
It could go a lot longer, but
Yeah,
basically,
we'll just make it the topic for the conversation.
there's an equivalent of contemplative prayer in every tradition
Mm,
that has any depth to it. And essentially, it involves being receptive, opening ourselves and consenting to the Spirit's presence and action in us. So it involves letting go of the way we usually control our meditation or our prayer.
mm.
As Thomas Keating, my teacher, put it, if you do the prayer, then the prayer does you.
So when a lot of people think of meditation, they think I should sit and close my eyes or open my eyes, sit in perfectly still and no thinking. And then they go 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 30 seconds and they get frustrated because they can't make their mind go quiet. So they give up meditation. So what's the difference between what you're describing and say something like that?
Well, I think what you just described is a normal human experience.
Yeah.
The fact is, we cannot stop our minds from thinking.
Mm. Yeah.
They're like a perpetual motion machine, the mind is,
Mm.
with your memory and your intellect, imagination, things coming from the unconscious. Uh, we can't stop it.
Yeah.
But that's part of the genius of the method of centering prayer, it consenting to the presence and action of the Spirit in us. The Spirit in us can quiet all of our faculties
Mm.
and bring us into a state of silence where we're not doing any thinking.
Mm.
But it's not something that we can bring about as an individual consciousness or ego on our own.
Mm.
And of course, attempts to do so are foredoomed to end in frustration
Mm.
if that's an expectation
Yeah.
that somebody has when they enter into this kind of meditation. Generally speaking, as Thomas Keating has taught, there's a continuum of different methods and techniques of meditative practice. At one end of the continuum is the extremely concentrative, and at the other end is the extremely receptive.
Mm. Active and passive.
Yeah, active and passive, and the ones that most of us are familiar with are more in the concentrative variety.
Mm.
Or another way of putting it is to say there's meditation with form and without form. The Greek word for that is cataphatic, means with form, and apophatic means without form.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and well, in the Hindu tradition, they talk about nama rupa, name and form.
Mm.
And the concentrative practices use those things as tools to bring us to a deeper place. But then the deeper types of practices, like what I had a teacher from India named Swami Amar Jyoti,
Yeah.
and he taught to some of his students, and I got to be one of them, what he called Sahaja Meditation.
Hmm.
And Sahaja means the natural state. So this type of meditation is virtually the same as what centering prayer is. It's non-conceptual, and it's a state of just being as you are in the present moment. The present moment has no bottom, no top to it. It's infinite. You can never get to the bottom of it.
My dad kept a cassette tape. I think you probably gave it to him, or maybe he attended one of Jyoti's lectures. But
Yes.
I have a long recording of him talking about how people get upset that he people invite him into his house, figuratively, and then he says, "Oh, I see you have a lot of things hidden under the carpet."
And what I do, I raise the carpet up. and and then, to be true to my profession again, I take the broom and begin to sweep. And it creates the vapor and fog of the dust. And the host says, "What are you doing?" Everything was silent, peaceful, empty. You are you are making it all kind of, messy, and you are confusing me. And so I said, "Why did you invite me?"
People don't want to see it themselves. They don't want to confront it, and so they get upset at him. I don't know what the rest of that context was. I just remember that.
Well, yeah, what's under the carpet is our obstacles.
Mm.
So it's essential that we address and take care of that, because that's our unfinished business, psycho-spiritual business we have with ourselves. And as long as we try to ignore it, then we remain stuck.
Mm.
And the obstacles continue to impact us in daily life and to prevent us from going deeper into meditation or prayer, into the presence of the mystery.
Mm. Now, you also have a background in Vajrayana Buddhism, as well as contemplative prayer. When you were talking about the forms of meditation, I couldn't help but think of the, I forget its name, the staff of Padmasambhava. There's the head that represents desire, the world of desire. And then there's another head representing the world of form, and another head that's the skull representing formlessness. So I was thinking the form of meditation that I described at the beginning of trying, maybe that's the desire meditation, which is sort of a contradiction. And then you can move up from there into form, and then eventually to formlessness.
Yeah, well, one of the things, I think Ann Davies from the BOTA teaches this on her CDs on the Tarot Arcana and the Tree of Life, is if you're going to do, she's not using my language, so I'm not quoting her, but I'm just conveying the message in words. If a person wants to do a good concentrative practice, which is what the Vajrayana is, pretty much is various concentrative practices with mantras and yantras and mudras and ritual and all that, which speaks directly to the deep unconscious and produces transformation, just as in the Western tradition, the tarot arcana serve a similar function. In order to be able to concentrate on something, you have to be genuinely interested in it and care about it. If your heart's not in it, you're not going to be able to concentrate.
Yeah. That explains why
So
I've read so few books.
our desires are the things that we can really easily concentrate on because we care about
Yeah.
them and we're interested in them.
We get a reward from it. Maybe
We think
some,
we will, anyway.
yeah, or maybe some chemical stimulant reward, dopamine or something.
Yes. So if we can switch our desire to our higher aspirations and develop a caring heart towards that goal,
Mm.
and that was something Swami Amarjyoti stressed quite a bit, is you have to care for the goal.
Yeah.
Some of the things he said that I thought were very good were, if you focus on the light, then the shadow falls behind you.
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah.
all methods end in silence. Was another one of his beautiful aphorisms. Another one was, don't blame the darkness, bring the light.
Mm. Yeah. Mm. That reminds me of a couple things, actually. In Golden Dawn, a lot of this podcast originally started out focusing on Golden Dawn, but then it branched out in a lot of directions. But it reminded me of there's the guardian in the west of the place of the sunset, and so he sits and stares at the east, and then there's the Hierophant in the east who represents Tiferet, and so I always tell people when I'm training them as Hieros that the Hieros doesn't fight darkness by turning around and facing west and saying, I'm going to fight you, darkness. He fights darkness by staring directly at the Hierophant and maintaining that link and maintaining that light in the darkness. That was the one thing. And then the other thing I've forgotten. Oh, yeah. The Lord of the universe who works in silence and whom not but silence can express. My friend Frater Silence would appreciate that one.
Oh, yes. Well, yes, silence that's where the deepest practice is.
Mm.
But, to enter into that and to be there, we have to have, according to Swami Amarjyoti, you cannot meditate well unless you have 80% peace of mind.
70's not enough.
And peace of mind, as I see it, it requires living in harmony with our conscience, or with cosmic spiritual law, Zan Davies would put it, and the healing of our emotional wounds, which are the stuff that's under the carpet.
Yeah, which can take time and processing.
Absolutely.
Bringing what's hidden into the light, bringing the unconscious conscious.
Yeah, and part of the beauty of centering prayer is that we already assume that the divine is present within us and has complete access to our unconscious. So when we consent to the action of the divine in us, we're giving the spirit permission to go to work in our unconscious and do the healing and the purification and whatever else needs to be done, and to bring to our attention those things that we need to become consciously aware of in ourselves that we perhaps have rejected or are fearful of or feel threatened by.
Yeah.
Like if a person is carrying a lot of anger,
Yeah.
for example, or if they've had some traumatic experience or some heartbreaking loss that they never fully grieved and healed from, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own story.
Mm.
We're all unique, and that's probably part of what makes the whole thing interesting for the spirit.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as one size fits all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. We're more than 99% the same in our DNA, and yet the diversity, the multifariousness of humanity. I have a two-part question. Oh, sorry. Karma. Yeah, past life and soul. These are cars, basically.
That's what we carry with us in conscious.
Yeah.
is everything we've accumulated, not just in this life, but
Mm.
everything that's pending that hasn't been resolved
Yeah.
or balanced out from the past.
I've
Who
written a
knows how
book
far?
on that reminds me of. I want to send it to you. It's 37 pages. I'm looking into different ways that I want to publish it. I think this one I actually want to try to publish in some form rather than just posting on Facebook like I usually do. But I have a two-part question if I can remember it. Yeah, I was reminded when you were talking about centering prayer of the first step in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know if you, yeah, I mean, if you have been, of course, it's anonymous. You know, I have been through my
there is
AA time.
There's actually a centering prayer program that works with AA.
What?
There's a centering prayer program that Thomas Keating developed that works with AA as the 11th
good.
step.
Yeah, I thought they would be very compatible.
That first, yeah, that's the way of relating to your higher power.
Yeah.
The first statement, though, is that we realized our lives are unmanageable.
Oh, okay. So not everybody who practices contemplative prayer is going to need to include that part or feel comfortable including that part. But
so
the
Thomas Keating says we should study the 12 steps.
Yeah.
He recommends studying the 12 steps because even if you're not an alcoholic or other addict,
they're useful.
It applies to you anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's an addict of some kind or has some kind of.
We're all addicted to our emotional programs for happiness that don't work.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the setup. So I know a lot of people that have gone through AA have trouble with the first step. People who have a Christian background and have a positive relationship with the Christianity of their youth will have no problem with step one. Sometimes people who are, you know, like maybe they have rejected the Christianity of their youth and moved into more of an atheistic position, they have a little more trouble. I know one person chose Mickey Mouse as their higher power. One person chose a doorknob as their higher power. And, you know, if somebody is getting into Eastern practices or something else, then they can say Shiva is my higher power or Om is my higher power, something like that. What would you, okay, a two-part question. That's the setup. Here's the two-part question. I know you've worked a lot with Catholics. Do you find that there is any, generally speaking, obviously there's a billion Catholics or more, 2 billion, I don't know how many. Is there something that increases the compatibility with centering prayer? That's part one of question one. And part two, is there something that inhibits or obstructs a practicing or traditional Catholic's ability to approach centering prayer?
Well, we say centering prayer is not for everybody. Mm.
But yeah, I've seen your face on the cover of Catholic magazine talking about centering prayer, so I know there's a connection there.
Yeah. Mm. Well, in my book, The Bridge Across Troubled Water, which part of which was to respond to Catholic objections and misunderstandings and misrepresentations of centering prayer, I say that there's 3 questions the person needs to ask themselves. And if they can answer yes to all 3 of them, then centering prayer may be appropriate for them.
Okay.
And those questions are, first of all, do you really sincerely want to have a deeper relationship with Christ or with God or with the Spirit? The second one is, are you in reasonably good mental health?
Yeah.
In other words, are you just normally neurotic like most of us?
Right. Yeah.
Or do you have some
deeper
serious issues, psychiatric issues?
Yeah. My first student, it turned out, had some kind of form of schizophrenia, and he started evoking angels, and then he was convinced the angels wanted him to sacrifice his son, and they had to take his son away from him, and it was terrible to watch. It was painful to watch. I mean, I'm sure it was even more painful for him and for his partner. But yeah, that was what I was thinking, is opening up to a higher power and letting go of control can be a little iffy if somebody's hearing voices.
It freaks a lot of people out.
Yeah.
Literally freaks a lot of people out. And you see, when you do this practice, it opens you to the energies of the unconscious. So if you're not prepared to deal with that, then don't do this.
Yeah.
It's like somebody taking a psychedelic like LSD or something, you know.
Yeah.
It's going to open you up to whatever's inside of you.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready for that, then God, don't do it.
Yeah.
Please. And then the third question is, do you feel an attraction to praying in silence without you doing anything other than consenting to God's presence in action? So if somebody can answer yes to all three of those, they want a deeper relationship, they're in reasonably good mental health, and they feel attracted to praying in silence, then try it out and see what you think.
Now,
Give it a trial run.
What if, let's say I've never met you before, and you've just told me this, and then my response is, I have a rough time with those questions because I don't know if I believe in a higher power, but I've studied Carl Jung, and I understand the importance of these symbols in my unconscious and then the collective unconscious. But when I say God, I think of, the man who used to shout from the pulpit in the place where my grandma dragged me. And when I think of Christ, I think of cheesy movies, from the 70s. But I hear that this method is good, and I want it to be good. How can I get to that place where I can surrender control when I don't believe that there is anything beyond myself? I'm a Thalamite, and I believe there is no God but man. What do I do? Should I just skip contemplative prayer? I'm not saying that this is me. I'm just saying for my audience.
The choice is up to you always. Do you believe you have a spiritual dimension, or do you believe human beings are simply intelligent animals with no spiritual component to their makeup at all? If that's the case, then
let's say I don't understand the meaning of the word spiritual. When I was young, and this is partially actually coming from me, but I'm emphasizing and pretending it's the biggest part. When I was little, I thought I understood the word spiritual. And then so I investigated and found out in all these linguistic roots it has to do with air, ruach and prana and all this. And then the more I investigated, the more I wanted to know. I got a microscope, I got a telescope, I got an encyclopedia, and I wanted to know what this spirit was. And eventually I realized it doesn't fucking exist, because every time you try to pin it down, it just moves over there, and it's slippery like a fish. And so I believe in the collective beauty of nature. I believe that the nature, Mother Nature on this earth is an extension of the cosmos, and that buried deep in the rock of an asteroid is the potential for a green earth and even something like humanity to aspire and invent something like spirituality. Can I still do contemplative prayer?
Sure, if you want to, you can try it. There's nothing that can stop you.
Yeah.
If you want to give it a try. The theory,
because it also applies to step one of AA, and a lot of people have trouble with AA because of step one. So I'm hoping we can maybe help one person.
Would you recite step one as you understand it?
Oh, it's been a few years. I accept that my life has become unmanageable and I cannot manage it myself, and so I surrender to a higher power to help me, something like that. Very, very close to that, I think.
Well, like you mentioned Jungian psychology a little earlier, a person that might be an atheist or agnostic could be a Jungian.
Yeah.
But in Jungian psychology, there's the idea of the self with a capital S.
Okay, yeah, that gets into, I mean, there maybe even is a crossover there. Maybe the Catholics might think this is getting into some territory that's a little bit heretical, but in Kabbalah, they talk about Ehyeh, which is the self of God in a sense. I am that I am. The burning bush said Ehyeh, Ashir Ehyeh. And so it's a divine name. And then there's, me, ego. And so they differentiate between the lower self and the higher self. And even the higher self isn't God himself, but the higher self has direct access to God. So we lower selves. So in translating this into those terms, then centering prayer would be about opening the lower self up to the higher self.
Yes, it would be, well, it's about the healing and transformation of the personality.
Mm.
And that work is done by the higher self within us.
Mm.
And you don't need to call it God.
Mm.
And a lot of it is simply semantics.
Right.
The process works if you work with it and if you trust it. But in order to let go, the person has to trust.
It works if you work it.
Yeah, if you work it, it'll work you.
Yes. Nice.
There is something inside of us, just as the physical body knows how to heal itself when it's injured, if it's given what it needs to work with.
Yeah.
The soul or the psyche is the same way. It knows how to heal itself if we create the right conditions that will allow it to do so.
Mm.
As long as we continue doing those things that prevent it from doing so, it's not going to be able to.
Yeah.
So you have to have some belief in something deeper within ourself than our ego,
Yeah.
our separate self sense,
Mm.
because that's something that is continually changing,
Mm.
and basically it's kind of pathological if it tries to become its own god.
Yeah. It's tricky. Yeah, I mean, I know another possible devil's advocate kind of point of view is to think, well, ego is the Greek word for I, and in a sense, ehyeh is the Hebrew word for I. So we've taken one language, one culture's word for self and made it bad, and the other culture's word for self and made it holy. And then Freud, who has been all but completely rejected by any serious psychologist, decided to invent this concept called ego. And then in spiritual and New Age communities, we use it as if it were part of the English language. So what do we mean if somebody says, what I am my higher self? What are you talking about, ego? Or they say, I have no ego, I've killed my ego. What you see before you is not an ego, it's my higher self. I guess they wouldn't really be interested in centering prayer, would they?
Well, I would say people are capable of a lot of self-delusion.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's a very tricky thing. As far as what we refer to as ego goes, I would like first to talk about ego consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we can all relate to, because in ego consciousness is what allows us to distinguish one thing from another.
Oh, right. In the five the koshas, the intellect and the ability to distinguish.
If we didn't have ego consciousness, we would just be experiencing everything as
like a baby.
Kind of a monistic oneness with no features.
Yeah.
We couldn't survive in these bodies.
Yeah.
So ego consciousness allows us to
survive,
make the distinctions we need to make in order to survive and relate to the created reality that we're in as human beings.
Mm.
Now, within that ego consciousness, if we develop a sense of identity as a center of I within the ego consciousness as our identity, who and what we think we are, that becomes an ego, personality,
Right.
or an ego identity.
Mm.
And if we absolutize it, then it becomes a major stumbling block to spiritual growth and basically a
Right.
major delusion,
Yeah.
because then we try to satisfy it.
Mm.
It's that has the desires.
Yeah.
And desire itself is not a good or a bad thing. It depends on what it is we want. And that's the fundamental question we always need to ask ourselves. What do I really want?
Yeah.
What's really important to me?
Mm. That reminded me of my dad's quote from Transformations. Survival is the yoke of ego, which is burned off. Aliveness is the delight of being, which breathes in its own element.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he's calling aliveness. That's like the Sahaja,
Mm.
the natural state.
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
natural state is a state of spontaneous joy and celebration and well-being that's grounded in the present moment.
Right. Where
Rather
survival is
than,
based on the fear of the end of my existence in the form of a wolf or something. Yeah.
it takes us out of the present moment into either the future or the past.
Yeah. In here somewhere.
And then we lose that magic of the
Whoa.
Sahaja state
Yeah.
of well-being.
Hmm. It's good to see you,
Something
Kess.
else. Well, thank you. Likewise.
It's been a
So
long
good
time.
to see you.
Yeah. I remembered, I won't reveal too much, but I remembered you were wearing something one time when we had in private, and I decided to go ahead and wear this. I've never wore this publicly. This is my Nyingma robe. Picked up in Bhutan. In Bhutan, they took me to a Nyingma monastery, and they claimed to have the breastplate of Padmasambhava inside of cloth and allowed me to touch it. And it was such an electric experience. We were surrounded by the ancient scrolls of, the three vehicles of Buddhism. And yeah, it was just such a beautiful thing. And so I bought this knot, the knot of love and the lotus of purity. And then immediately I went and got the same robe that the monk was wearing that allowed me to touch Padmasambhava. But I just, for the audience, I know when a white guy dresses in something from another culture, especially if it's religious, it's generally considered totally inappropriate and cultural appropriation. I'm not trying to sell anything. It's only with great respect that I wear this, and anyway. But it was inspired by you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. When I saw, I was like, I've got to get a robe one day. When I saw it.
You've been on quite an adventure since you left Los Angeles.
Yes. Yes, it's been life-changing.
You've even gotten married.
I did. It's been really nice to, for one thing, have another story, because when I first started traveling, people would say, so what's your story? And my story was kind of like, it was interesting, but it wasn't like good. It wasn't something that I liked or was proud of. But now my story is, how did you end up in India? And then I can start at the end of my old story is the beginning of my new story. So I just tell the new story. It all started when I sold everything and left the US.
Are you planning to have kids?
Well, I might have some in-laws listening to this. So I'll just say maybe could happen.
Well, you could say inshallah, as the Muslims do.
We'll see.
Or enchilada, some people.
Yeah. Inshallah. Yeah. There's a little bit of tension. My in-laws are they lean more toward Congress party. That's like the Democrats here. as opposed to the other ones that are in power right now that I probably shouldn't say because I live here and they can revoke my visa.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah, yeah. But I did formally convert to Hinduism and formally renounce the Savior Jesus Christ, and so they're very happy with me. No, that was that was actually a required step at one point. There's ways to go around that. People can find ways around that, but the simplest way to get married in India is to formally convert to Hinduism, and then you can get married by a Brahmin. Government respects
as
it.
I understand it, Jesus is considered one of the avatars of Vishnu.
Yeah.
And Ramakrishna certainly explored the Christian
That's
path
true.
during part of his life.
Yes. The common link between New Age and Hindu, Ramakrishna.
I studied the Gospel of Ramakrishna when I was living at Swami Amar Jyoti's ashram above Boulder in a place near Gold Hill, a place called Sacred Mountain Ashram. I spent a couple of years there as a hermit. And that book was just a really deep and powerful companion for me, the Gospel of Ramakrishna by M.
I haven't read it, but he explored a lot of different paths, right?
Yes, he did. He tried everything. He was demonstrating that you can get to God through any of these doors. And that's basically what all the cataphatic practices and the idea of universal spirituality is about. All of them, they'll ultimately bring you to the point where you transcend language and concept and image and form, and you go into the non-conceptual silence and commune with that reality there, which we can't really describe or talk about because it transcends all that. It's the ultimate mystery it's everywhere and in everything. It's the ultimate consciousness. Each individual soul or center of consciousness is one of the infinite numbers of centers of consciousness of this divine mystery. So it's always close to all of us, all at the same time, secretly living our life with us, within us, experiencing everything that we think, feel, say, and do.
Yeah.
Allowing us to drive the car, to make the decisions, until we get to the point where we freely choose to turn over the driver's seat to the divine partner we have, by whatever name we want to call her or him.
Someone asked Dan Harmon, the producer of Rick and Morty, what's the meaning of life? And he said, we are taste buds on the tongue of God. So the meaning of life is to taste ourselves. It's like, yeah, that's a good answer.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I don't think I'd heard that one before.
Yeah, I think he came up with it on the fly. I'm not sure.
Well, it was very creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, the meaning of life is love. And love for each of us is whatever we care about the most. So for each of us, the meaning of life is derived from what we put our preciousness into.
Yeah.
What we invest with our heart's preciousness and truly care about. So the quality of the meaning of life is relative to the quality of what we care about.
Yeah. Makes sense. I ordered all the books that I don't have yet, including that one that you mentioned, that it was addressing the Christian concerns with meditation. I think I have the ones you gave me. You gave me 2 books, The Will of Divine Love and The Creation of Reality. And
The Creation of Reality was a much earlier book, long before I ever heard of centering prayer. But that book was transmitted to me from a spiritual teacher, a non-physical spiritual teacher, who's on a very high plane,
Mm.
and he's still working with me. What I'm writing now, a lot of it is coming from that source, who identified himself as the old soul.
Mm. How interesting. Like a guide from the inner planes.
Absolutely.
Mm. And then, so I have, of course, your unpublished book, which I'm hanging on to. I've read through that one. And so, yeah, yesterday I ordered all the ones that I didn't previously have. Are you hearing a lot of noise coming from behind me?
No.
Oh, good. Oh,
Occasionally
that's
I've heard
great.
of dog barks.
Oh, this microphone is great. Sorry.
I've heard a couple of dog barks, but no,
Okay.
mostly nothing.
Okay.
I hear
What it is.
some birds.
Yeah, there's like a rumbling engine or something, like a generator.
Where are you right now,
Oh,
physically in India?
I am in Goa. We're living in Candolim, but I am currently in Kalungate. I'll say this much. Right now we're in lockdown, so all the hotels are closed. So it would be illegal for me to stay in a place that's technically a hotel. So I won't say the name of the place exactly where I'm staying, but I'm on a little retreat. Basically, by thanks be to God, I'm able to take care of things without having to work. So that basically translates into, especially during lockdown, Piu and I, my wife and I, being in shared space literally 24/7, which it turns out after a few years, even, if you love each other, like you need some space, And so we discovered that it's a good idea every once in a while for one of us or the other to just go take a few days and just be in a place. Right now, I'm also quitting smoking, so that also helps a lot. Because when I quit smoking, I get grouchy, and so better that I'm by myself for the first few days.
Yeah, you go through withdrawal, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's beautiful and tropical. The beach is right next to me, and it's a beautiful place. Really beautiful.
Well, I've heard a lot of bad things about the pandemic in India on the news.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a major catastrophe.
Yeah, there's a
really
lot of layers to it. Yeah, it's a little better this week. The numbers of new cases has dropped a lot, probably because the whole country went back into lockdown. There's a few things. There's a few things that affect it, like the families of victims. The people who pass away. The family gets 2,000 basically to lock. Which is a little more than $2,000. And if they have no family, then that money kind of goes to the hospital. So there have been a few cases of really shitty hospitals in certain areas, lying and, maybe even euthanizing people who don't have any familial connections, and then very quickly burning the bodies and saying it's COVID, and then they collect the money. $2,000 in India is a much bigger
it's a lot of money
thing than So I mean, I'm not saying that is a factor. It's a small factor. Probably it doesn't mean that that's why the numbers are so high, but there's more than one thing happening. Among them might be, in the beginning, a little bit of covering up and wanting to save face and say, oh, what? Oh, no COVID here, which a few countries seem to be doing that. And so, yeah, it went from no cases to all the cases, and it was a bit shocking. Here in Goa, I think they're up to about 30%. 30% of the people in Goa have COVID or have had COVID.
It's a lot.
And I haven't gotten it yet. The vaccine that is available to us, Covix, is 81% effective. So I don't know what Biden's talking about with this whole "Let's help India" thing, but we haven't seen any Pfizer or Moderna or any assistance from the U.S. But anyway, so that's available, but I can't get an appointment. It's if you're over 45, you can get an appointment, but everybody from 18 to 45, you sign in every day and you see all the appointments are booked and there's no new appointments, and then you log in again tomorrow.
Well, do you have a strong immune system?
Yeah, so I mean that quitting smoking will help with that, but
Yeah, your lungs. Right.
yeah,
That's one of the
right.
attacks.
Yeah.
So smokers are handicapping themselves.
Yeah.
But if your immunity is strong, according to my healthcare provider, Dr. Greg, he says if your immunity is strong and you don't have underlying conditions,
Yeah.
you'll be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Most of the people that get really sick become that way because the COVID attacks the weaknesses that they already have.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it should be
in the
fine.
lungs,
It's just,
in the lungs, and the heart, or wherever.
yeah.
I know I was exposed to it. I've
You had
been
it?
sequestered for over a year
Mm.
in my condo, and the only times I've gone out is to get food or go to a medical appointment.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're
And I
doing
just
all right.
treated it as a retreat time,
Yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Pew
I
gets
started out doing a lot of reading. I reread Lama Govinda's autobiography, The Way of the White Clouds, and doing a lot of Vajrayana practice and meditation and centering prayer. And then after a while, I was invited to give a talk on the theme of oneness for a group called the Alaska Center of Spiritual Living, to do it on Zoom. And so in the process of preparing for that, I got the energy to do the writing project. And so since last November, I've been really focused on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm gonna send you my my book if you it's, I mean, I don't know if it's a book, if it qualifies, or if it's a long short story, but I'll send it to you, and so you can have a look at that. I won't say anything about it. I'll just let it stand on its own.
Yeah, please do send it.
Yeah.
I'd like to read it. Yeah. If you send it to my GCI email, I can print it.
Okay. I can attach a PDF, like as a PDF attachment. Okay, cool. That sounds good. How's the weather up there?
It's very nice. We have close to 19 hours of sunlight every day now.
Oh, wow. That's nice. Now,
yeah, it's still
you're in
light
Anchorage,
out
right?
at 11. Yeah, I'm in Anchorage.
Okay, yeah.
And
nice.
it's been in the 60s and gets down in the 40s at night. Sometimes it's overcast and drizzle. Sometimes it's just beautiful sunshine.
Here by the equator, winter isn't much different from summer, but there's a monsoon season that we're just getting to the beginning of, that I've been looking forward to all year, because I've never experienced tropical rain continuously, for weeks on end. It's one thing I've never experienced.
Is that going to hit heavy where you are in the area you're in?
Yeah. When we moved here, we were living in Delhi before, which is like worse than LA, in some ways, but obviously it's better in other ways. LA, if you want history, you go to the Nuestra Senora Regina de Los Angeles and remember when, in the 1600s when the Spanish came. In Delhi, it's like, you want history, it's like, you want the 2,000-year-old history or the 1,000-year-old history or the 500-year-old history. Like it's over there, and over there, So in that sense, it's very interesting and beautiful. Like if you can get past the smog and the shouting and the honking and the dust and everything and the smell, then you can see the richness of the humanity and the history of it. And I got really into that. I was like studying the Moguls and everything, but it was nice to leave, and get someplace with good air and not as much crowd, and all that.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah. Plus, Goa is
But-
such a perfect fit for us because Pew's been drawn toward the Christian teachings, and of course, you know me, I've been as much involved in Christian as Buddhist and Hindu.
Yes.
And Goa is such. Some people say New Age started in Goa. Hypnotism started in Goa. That turns out to be a thing. There's been a lot of rough, Inquisition type history. Obviously, that was a terrible period. But this is, these days it's most known for the rave parties, and a lot of hippie kids come here and take LSD and party on the beach and all that. But there's these old beautiful churches, these old Portuguese style churches, and some big cathedrals. There's this one big cathedral that was struck down by the wrath of God. So it's just a shell. It's like you're seeing a ruin from ancient Greece or something, but it's only about 500, 400 years old. But you can see the design for it and what must have been going on inside. And such a rich and interesting history here. And so, yeah, I've been getting along with the ghosts pretty well so far.
The ghosts?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of like haunted stories and books that take place in Goa. And, a lot of people were tortured to death and so on. Even if the Portuguese had a colony in China or the Philippines, and someone in one of their colonies was suspected of secretly being Jewish, they would put them in a boat and take them to Goa so they could stand trial and be executed. So this was kind of more than Spain and Portugal. It was kind of the heart of the Inquisition in the world, especially in Asia. But because everybody that would have been killed in Spain and Portugal, not everybody, but most people, got the heck out of there and went somewhere safe. And the coolest, safest place at the time was Goa. And then that turned out to be the least safe place. And so everybody fled Goa. So there's a lot of, Jewish and Muslim and secret Jewish and, this kind of thing that fled into Maharashtra and Kerala and hundreds of years ago. So it just kind of adds to the tapestry of the diversity of India, really.
Well, that's got a history.
Yeah.
Thousands of years old.
Oh, yeah.
All the way back, to the time of the Mahabharata.
Yeah. And before.
Veda Vyas, the great author of the Vedas, and Vyasa, I guess they called him.
That Indus River Valley, those ruins, I was watching something about them, and someone said something interesting, that it's not only that the place is so old and so sophisticated, it's that it couldn't have been that sophisticated if these things hadn't already been developed way before that. So it was what we're actually looking at is the end of a civilization that went back, we don't know how far. And then it dried up, and that's the part we saw. It's like the end of it. And then everybody went south.
Yeah, I remember hearing a few years back that they discovered under the ocean a complete city.
Oh yeah, the
coast of
Krishna
India
city,
somewhere.
the city he built. There was apparently a man who was a king, who was romantic, and then after a few hundred years, they decided that he should be a god because they loved him so much. And then after a few more hundred years, somebody wrote his backstory and decided he was a little thief who stole butter and ghee, and that he was the incarnation of Vishnu, and thus we have Krishna. But I want to go to that city. I want to get a scuba, I would like to see that, just to have been there.
Yeah.
So much noise. I don't know what's happening here. Sorry. People are running generators and stuff.
I don't hear them.
Oh, that's so good.
So your
I hope that it
microphone's
doesn't come through in
working
the
well.
final recording. So what else? I think we covered all the basic stuff, Vajrayana and contemplative prayer. Obviously, there's a lot more we could talk about. Let's talk about my dad.
Oh yeah.
I always explain to people that you interviewed my dad in 1990, and that as a result of that, I have a 90-minute recording of my dad which is a huge golden thing to have for someone who's lost their, dad, and if they care about their dad.
Absolutely.
And so I figured it's not that I owe you anything, but I think it's poetic that I've interviewed you so many times on Esoterinerd.
Yeah.
This is Kess again. It is Thursday, July 26th, 1990. I'm up in Sierra Madre Canyon, Southern California, at the home of my friend Dan Reib. What would you say, in a few words, John, is the purpose of public education in America today?
Well, the de facto purpose, unfortunately, has become lost because we have gotten involved in a lot of finite aims and possibly a misinterpretation of an 18th century term in the Declaration of Independence, where it said that we were entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're not supposed to find happiness, we're supposed to pursue it, is the contemporary term. The pursuit of happiness in 18th century English meant that you were supposed to live life in the most beneficent and serene way possible. And the meaning of the language has changed, so that we put a neurotic spin on the meaning of it. And that's part of the problem. Okay, because of this, because of the proliferation of people, because of commercial advertising, we have lost our sense of aim or direction, which I take to mean the sense of purpose. I would say that my sense of purpose as an educator is to allow students to discover how to relate to others with mutual benefit. And in line with the 18th century definition of the pursuit of happiness, rather than the 20th century definition.
Maybe I'll play a little clip of that interview at some point in the episode.
Well, yeah, it gives a good feeling for your dad's presence.
Yeah.
And just, he was such a unique individual.
Mm.
Certainly one of a kind.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely put me on the path, I feel like for both my parents, in a way, maybe it's the psychedelics or the meditation or something, but I feel like on one level, my life is an extension of theirs. Obviously, I have a soul that incarnates, and so it's a partial truth on one level. So in that way, I see my dad, when he was 19 or whenever it was, he went to India on the Queen Mary, and he stayed in Bombay, now Mumbai, and he witnessed abject poverty and death. And it was so shocking to him that it eventually led to his being Buddhist, according to him. At least that's what he told me. And so I think it's very, again, poetic to come to India, and it's been developed obviously a lot since my dad was here in the early 60s. And of course, it depends on kind of where you go. You can still go to some areas where you can be horrified by the abject poverty. But Goa isn't one of those places.
Yeah,
It's
I remember your
sort
dad.
of the Southern California of India.
I remember your dad telling me when he went to India, I don't know if he went with his mom or who he went with, but he was getting off the boat, and not far from where he got off the boat, there was like this big pile of dead bodies of corpses with vultures. And he saw this one vulture pulling the intestines out of a corpse.
I can expound upon that. He got off the boat, and they told him not to give money to anybody. And then people were crowding, change, money. And so he had some coins in his pocket, and he threw it, and everybody dove into a big pile. And then he and his mom went to a taxi, and there was a man saying, "Tour of city, this much money, this many rupees." And then a guard came up. This was post-colonialization, but according to my dad's story, it was a British guard. came up and is this man bothering you? Yes, his mom said, we're just trying to get in the car. And so the guard picked up the man and threw him against a wall, and he just fell down on the ground. And so then later that night, my dad couldn't sleep. So his mom was asleep and he was wandering around the hotel, and it was dark, and he saw vultures, and he looked down from the edge of a cliff, and he saw a female corpse with vultures pulling out the entrails. So it sounded like those stories all got combined.
Well, he told me that there was a vulture was eyeing him, looking at
there
him.
was one looking at him and one eating.
Telepathically, he felt like the vulture was really thinking about how nice it would be to eat.
Yeah.
Your dad. Really creepy feeling, I guess.
So I mean, that led to my Buddhist path as well, because I grew up. He taught me about it and everything, and eventually it led me here. And partly, for a number of years, I always thought of myself as being specifically Tibetan Buddhist. And then one day, after doing enough research, I came to realize that Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot of forms of Tibetan Buddhism, but ultimately, if you go back to the Nyingma, it's no more or less than 7th century popular Indian culture exported to Tibet and then mingled with the native culture. And so everything led me back to India. Everything kept leading back to India.
Well, if it hadn't been for the transplanting of Vajrayana Buddhism from India
We
to
would have
Tibet,
lost it.
yeah, it would have been lost, because when the Muslims came in, I think it was around 1100 or something like that. All the Buddhists were centrally located in 2 large cities. Yeah, they just went in there converting with a sword and exterminated the whole thing and destroyed all their scriptures. And Marpa, Milarepa's guru, made a trip there, and he got a lot of the sacred scriptures and took them back to Tibet. So he and, of course, hundreds of years earlier, Padmasambhava were responsible for that tradition
Staying alive.
going to Tibet and staying there.
Another interesting one, Vimala Mitra. Not a whole lot is known about him, but what I can kind of piece together is he came with Padmasambhava to Tibet, and then he continued on into China, and then met Kukai from Japan. And then Kukai brought everything back and established Shingon in Mount Koyasan, which is basically it's Vajrayana Buddhism, but without the emphasis on Tibet or the bone deities, that became guardians. And it has a very different emphasis, and they're like magical things, like sit and face south at high noon, visualize a red triangle and light up this chakra and chant this way. These kinds of things that I know Dogen from the Zen school would say was not Buddhism at all, but it's so interesting. And the development of the Japanese language actually happened right around all these events. It wasn't Kukai, but his teacher. Bodhi something. It wasn't Bodhidharma. It wasn't any of the usual Bodhis. It was a different guy in Nauru. He was an Indian scholar, and then based on Sanskrit, they put together the 47 letters of the old Japanese alphabet, and really interesting stuff. So and then Kukai was young. He grew up around all that, and then he went back to China and then found Vajrayana and then brought it back and then established his own school in Mount Koya. And it's the similarities and differences. They have a dorja, but it looks a little different, and a lot of little things like that. The two places where Vajrayana still thrive and then the Tibetans had to come back into India, and the Tibetan Buddhism that's left in Tibet is slowly being changed by the CCP. but the sort of the old threads of Tibetan Buddhism still live here in India.
Well, it was very nice that India accommodated those refugees,
Yeah.
allowed them to come in, including the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, everybody I've met loves the Tibetans. When I was in Nepal, there was a little bit of resentment for some reason. I mean, I got the sense of people were like, the Tibetans, they don't pay any taxes. They get to live here for free, you know. And but in India, everybody seems to love the Tibetans. There's no bad vibes. I don't know why that is. Anyway. There's a Tibetan part of town here, but we haven't really been able to explore it because of the lockdown. It's like a marketplace. When everything's back to normal, we'll explore that.
Yeah, whenever that happens.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, if you go anywhere, you have to wear a mask, I suppose.
Yeah.
A breathing mask.
Yeah, in some areas, the cops actually beat people with bamboo sticks if they don't wear masks, or if they don't have a good reason why they came out. Yeah, the cops will say, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" They'll say, "Oh, I was just going for a walk." Bam, bam. It's like, don't go for a walk. You know? But if they say, "I'm going to get food," they say, "Okay, hurry up." You know? So, yeah, it's rough.
Boy, it sounds like they're pretty harsh.
Yeah, yeah. A little bit more than US, a little bit less than China. Yeah, in America, they're like, "Would you please not give each other the disease?" We ask politely. In India, they require it, and in China, they weld your door shut. So it's yeah, at least in one case. I ran out of subject matter, but I don't want to end the conversation. What do you think would be good for people to hear?
Well, I don't know exactly who's listening to or who listens to your podcast, so it's hard to.
Well, there's a new crop.
Hard to say.
There's basically they're mostly male, Freemason, young Freemason, interested in Hermetic Kabbalah, but also who studies Eastern paths. I think that's generally the demographic. Obviously, there's people outside of that. There's also female listeners, but I think it's more than 70% male. But not that matters. But just as human beings in the world today, going through this pandemic, going through, you know, all the political weirdness, all the bubble, the culture divide between people happening in US and in other countries, these extreme
the polarization.
Polarization, everybody hates the other side, and the faceless other, you know.
Well, you know, that's something that I've been trying to, in a spiritual way, address in my writing.
Mine too, actually. The book I'm going to send you is about that.
You know, the problem we have with the information wars.
Yeah.
And the disinformation versus the misinformation. And I guess you know the distinction between those two things.
Misinformation is accidental. Disinformation is intentional, I think.
Yeah. When a disinformation, the person spreading it knows they're lying.
Yeah.
And the misinformation is
rumors.
Somebody who has believed the lie and continues spreading it, but doesn't realize that it's not true.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they're not so culpable as the ones that are deliberately trying to manipulate people's consciousness and behavior.
Yeah.
Well, in reflecting on this, I was reminded of the great ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, who pretty much everybody's heard of.
Yeah, Socrates.
He was definitely an old soul.
Yeah.
And, you know, the oracle at Delphi was asked, who is the wisest person in our world? And the answer came back that it's Socrates.
Mm.
And when Socrates heard that, he was kind of dumbfounded because he did not consider himself to be the wisest person.
Mm.
The thing that he had discovered was that he really didn't know anything.
Mm.
And he discovered that for human beings, none of us really know anything, at least on the intellectual level,
Yeah.
because in order to operate the intellect, it's necessary that we make assumptions,
Mm.
which we cannot prove or disprove.
Mm. Yeah.
And with the information wars, there's a lot of assumptions being made.
Yeah.
And people that are buying into the bullshit, whatever side it's coming from, they're convinced that they really know.
And they've become expert
Mhm.
in dissecting common sense and consensus reality from the same, with the same tools they should be using to dissect their own positions. You know, like talking about the basic assumptions that you have to accept in order to believe that the government isn't trying to do some horrible thing, or that the media isn't part of some 1984 style, you know, conspiracy. It's like, well, these are big assumptions you're making, but you've swallowed those, and instead you're going to dissect my assumptions. You know what I mean? It's like frustrating.
Yeah, well, yeah, the part of the point as I've gotten to it is that you cannot know for sure whether the assumption is true or not true.
Mm.
So there's this great uncertainty principle.
Yeah. They take it once, like there was a flat earther guy that came on an episode back in the 20s, and he was saying, you know, can you tell me with absolute certainty that you know for a fact 100% beyond the shadow of a doubt that the world is not flat? And I had to admit, well, no, you know, I mean, given, yeah, it's possible that it's a huge conspiracy, because I mean, you know, yeah, it is. And then I said, well, can you admit that it's also possible that the world is round? And he said, no. I was like, okay, well, that's where we lose our, you know, like if you're expecting me to have such an open, you know, sense of like the Descartes level of certainty, you know, I only know that I am because I'm thinking. Everything else could be a dream. You know, you gotta be there with me. You can't say, you know, oh, well, you're uncertain, therefore I'm right about QAnon. I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah, so part of what I've written is called The Wisdom of Uncertainty.
Mm.
And, you know, a lot of people are very attached to their opinions or their sense of what they think is certain.
Mm. They even self-identify, like you were saying, the ego,
Yes.
the false self.
Yeah, they self-identify with it. And so if you question it, it means to them, you're questioning their authenticity.
Yeah, and they get the amygdala reaction and everything.
So there's an awful lot of emotional attachment.
Mm.
And because of that, the polarized sides are not able to have civil conversations or respect each other. They demonize each other instead.
Yeah, yeah. They only ever see each other at Thanksgiving, sitting around the table.
Something that Swami Amarjyoti also said that I just thought of was, you become what you oppose.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
With the uncertainty principle or the wisdom of uncertainty, it's a way of avoiding falling into all those traps.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to admit that life is an act of faith.
Mm.
It could be positive or negative faith.
Mm.
Even if a person is a doubter,
That's faith related. That's on
That's
the faith
negative faith.
scale. Yeah.
They believe that the doubt is correct, for 100%
You
sure.
have faith in the doubt.
It's an act of faith just as much as what, say, a fundamentalist Christian believes.
Right. It's like the
Who says they
atheist who
know?
says there definitely is no God is making a leap of faith.
Absolutely.
Mm.
We all are.
Yeah.
And if we all could admit that, then we could overcome the problem of the polarization
Yeah.
and just realize everybody has the right to choose their own point of view, their own opinion, but we're all equal in this. We're all equally unable to know anything for certain on the intellectual level.
Yeah.
When you experience something intuitively and you know it, it convinces the person, the subject who experiences it, and they know as far as they're concerned.
Right.
But that you can't get other people to know the same thing who haven't had that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can tell them about it, and they can accept it or reject it or be agnostic about it.
You can make a movie with a moving soundtrack that tries to get people to come around to the conclusion.
Yeah,
Propaganda, I think they call that.
yeah, it's an ancient game.
Yeah.
Misinformation, starting rumors, whether it's done socially, in high school or international, and where it starts wars and causes all kinds of trouble.
Yeah. My friend Kapil, that's his voice back there. He always says, the world is so beautiful, but the fucking humans. He'll be driving around and say, humans. It's pretty funny. But it's very true. They can be very frustrating. Without the humans, yeah, it can be harsh. Obviously, there's harsh weather and there's, food scarcity at times and things like that. Mother nature can be pretty brutal, but the humans take it to a whole other level of complexity and, tying of knots.
Well, we've tied ourselves up in a lot of knots.
Yeah.
I really do believe that wisdom of uncertainty is a way of unraveling all those knots.
Yeah.
Because it relativizes everything instead of absolutizing stuff that doesn't deserve to be absolutized.
Mm. But does it absolutize relativity?
Oh, well, that's a good question. There is an absolute, but it's a mystery.
Mm. Yeah.
Everything, to me, what I'm saying in my writing is everything in created reality is based on duality and it's relative. And it's always changing. So you can't absolutize any of it because it's not really stable.
Yeah.
It's energy in motion, which is what time is. It's measuring that movement.
I saw someone posting on liminal spaces, which is a whole other subject, saying that even a rock is a process and a transition from one state to another.
Absolutely. Just like, the sun, our sun seems eternal, but according to science, it's not going to burn forever.
Yeah. And it was always the ancient people's measure of eternity, the timeless.
It was like
abode.
an absolute.
Yeah.
Well, it would seem like an absolute, certainly.
Yeah.
To the human senses. But the human senses deceive us. Our Zalama Govinda once put it, everything in creation is a factual illusion.
Hey, while I've got you here, you might remember I wrote you actually, I think 2 years ago when I was in the middle of my journey through India, through Nepal, through Bhutan, and I was starting to, it seems like when anything from a distance, the world looks blue and green. And from a distance, Tibetan Buddhism just looks golden and yellow and beautiful. And there's prayer flags and incense and beautiful chanting. But if you start to dig into it, you know, obviously a lot of it is very beautiful and some of it is not. And especially there's the branch of it that hails Chogyong Trungpa as their founder. And it's based, I think, in US or somewhere in
the
Europe.
Shambhala organization.
Yeah, they're very popular and I love their books, but man, they've got some controversy right now. And it's pretty awful. I don't know if you've been keeping up on all that.
I haven't been, but my sister told me a little bit about it.
Yeah.
With Chogyam Trungpa's son.
I think a lot of people are losing faith. A lot of people that were
sexual indiscretions. That seems to have been the downfall of so many gurus from India and Tibet and whatever.
Yeah.
They can't handle American women, as Ram Dass once put it, because they're too out there with their sexuality.
It's too shocking.
But I don't know if that's true or not.
One level of it.
If that's the reason for it, is what I mean. But yeah, it has been the downfall of so many, and also other people, you know, like in politics and people in positions of power and authority, who are living off of their ego's vanity, succumb to all these things. Ramakrishna said it's women and gold. Those are the two main downfalls of humans, or of men anyway.
Yeah. Oh man. Speaking of California, it makes me think of the gold rush, those old towns where it's everybody trying to get gold, and then there's the hotel. What would you say to someone who maybe they had a pure practice and they just were seeing nothing but the good and nothing but the holy, and then they started seeing all these horrible articles about the head of their organization, and then even the founder of the organization being so inappropriate, and so now they're thinking, you know what, I thought that this spirituality was good, but I realize now it's bullshit, and I'm just gonna forget it. What would you say?
Well, I would say don't throw the whole thing away. Something that I know Chogyam Trungpa once said to one of his followers, who was becoming disillusioned because of some of the outrageous behavior. And Trungpa actually read the guy's mind and saw what was going on. And he said, you have to separate the teacher from the man with me.
Yeah.
And another thing I would say is that just about everything has a light side and a dark side. Everyone has a light side and a dark side. Organizations do, so forth. So if you create unrealistic, idealized expectations, and then you start worshiping it, of course, you get your heart broken when you discover that the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
But if you realize these leaders or exalted teachers are still human beings with a light side and a dark side, and it's unrealistic to expect them to be superhuman.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be some highly evolved adepts who have overcome human nature, but those are awful few and far between. And referencing the tree of life, which I think is the best map there is of the spiritual journey and the evolution of consciousness. And you would have to go in and explain more of this to your followers or people.
A lot of them, that's a good map to use because that's the one they're familiar with.
Within each of the 10 Sephiroth, there's a miniature tree of life, complete. And so once we begin the spiritual journey, we start in Malkuth Kingdom at the bottom of the tree. So say somebody who's very diligent works their way up through that tree, and when they get to Tiparath, beauty, or what equates to the Christ principle, that's when they start becoming somewhat spiritualized. They become concerned for social, political, economic justice, religious, educational, social freedom, the care of the earth, and all these sort of things that relate to the realm of Malkuth, which is the province of science. That they keep evolving up and say they become a spiritual teacher and they get to the level of Kether, the crown. There's a temptation there where they might think that they've completed the journey and that they're a perfected being.
Yeah.
And they have the charisma and they have all these things and they gather followers, but then they start succumbing to some of their lower self's temptations in the desire nature, and they commit sexual indiscretions, or they become greedy for power or money or whatever, and their dirty underwear shows up, and then their followers become disillusioned.
Yeah. It's almost
Well,
like a
this is to be
natural
expected.
process.
Yeah, this is to be expected of this level, but the person isn't aware of the map.
Yeah.
They don't see where they are on the tree. They think they're at the big Kether at the top of the tree.
Right. They're still in
When
Malkuth.
they're just a little Kether
Yeah.
down in Malkuth. They have to repeat the process, and go into Yesod.
Yeah.
Climb the tree again.
Mm.
The same temptation appears. Then they have to go into Hod. Then they have to go into Netzit. So many teachers who aren't aware of this map, who have become accomplished and who have good things to teach and good things to say, but they still have all the flaws of the human personality and desire nature.
Yeah.
Including the sex drive, power drive, and so forth. And so that's what happens.
One thing I love is if you have a chance, episode I think it's episode 77 of Esoterinerd, I recited volume 8 of Suryangama Sutra, in which basically it talks about how as you're on the path and you deeply meditate, that you'll achieve these great things and you'll have these wonderful visions, and that does not mean you're a sage yet. That accept the experience the experience, and it will pass. It's temporary. And they describe so many of them. There's one where you feel so sad that you think if you step on an ant, if it breaks your heart, like as if your own child has just died. And then it says that's a good state. Hang out with it. You're not a sage now. And then it moves on to the next one. There's another one where you'll be so happy, you'll be filled with happiness. That's a good state. Hang out with it. You're not a sage yet. then it goes on from there to talk about if you think you're a sage, you'll be susceptible to the demon's influence. Then it talks about all these types of students with their secret desires, and that the demon sees the desire, and then it takes over the body of one of these idiots who thinks they're a sage, and then comes as a false guru. and then it outlines the whole thing, and the 10 different ways that it can go. It's such a beautiful sutra. It's the straight and narrow pathway to enlightenment has so many distractions and so many different temptations, not just sexual, but every different thing. Like, you want the answer to be, hey, include this. I want enlightenment, but with a little bit of this. And so then that taints the path entirely.
That Surangama Sutra was one of Lama Govinda's favorite sutras. He highly recommended people study that.
The guy who recommended it to me probably got the recommendation from Lama Govinda.
He could have, who knows?
Yeah. He's anonymous. He called himself Bob Pliskin, which is a character from Escape from New York. But I never knew his real name. But he made me read this because I was on the internet telling everybody they need to open up their third eyes right now, and he was saying, "No, like not everybody needs to open their third eye right now. Read this." It's like, okay.
Well, yeah, the temptation of becoming ego inflated with spiritual pride and self-delusion is there, and people who succumb to it, and it's normal for spiritual teachers that as they're going through the different grades to go through that process, to make those mistakes and incur the karma that goes with it and have to rectify it in future lives and so forth. I'm trying to remember something I was just going to say. Their egos get inflated. Oh, they develop too high an opinion of themselves.
Yeah.
That's kind of the subtle hook.
Yeah. But then they'll get around it by saying, no, it's not about me, ego. It's about Christ in me. And now I'm such a beacon of Christ now that when I see myself, I only see Christ. And so I love myself. Like something like that. Some roundabout, weird, new age way of saying.
Well, some very highly evolved beings succumb to this because they don't realize that there's still seeds to be cooked. They've got a long ways to go.
Lord of the Rings a little? Sorry, I'm interrupting. Go on.
I was going to say there are many graced experiences that we receive that are given to show us what lies ahead and to encourage us in our journey. But if we succumb to the delusion that now I've arrived and I'm perfect, then the ego is completely taken over.
Yeah.
And the person does not know it. And they really perfect the art of practicing what Swami Amarjyoti called the egoless ego. So they can convince people that they've overcome the ego, but they're still stuck. And that can happen to any of us. The only way to protect yourself against it is humility. Patience and humility. We need to practice those and never stop practicing them.
Yeah. Patience and humility.
Those, they may seem boring to people who are looking for sensational experiences, but that's a mature spirituality is grounded in very, very strong, powerful, deep humility. When I had my first encounter in a dream with the old soul that's been guiding me, one of the things I picked up was that here is a being who was infinitely humble and was radiating love to the point I was looking at him across the pond and he was communicating telepathically with me. But every time he moved when he was approaching, this love came off of him that put me into tears and bliss.
That's beautiful.
But the message I got, looking him in the eye and the face, was this is infinite humility and infinite compassion and infinite love.
That's beautiful.
That's mature spirituality.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to keep having all these peak experiences. You're at a point where you can abide in the consciousness. I'm not there yet myself by any means, but I know this is true, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I assume it's true. You're content to abide in peace, humility, and patience within yourself, knowing you're connected to the divine presence and you're trying to serve the divine plan. Not seeking any acclaim for yourself or having a need for that.
Yeah.
But realizing that everyone is God. We're all part of the same oneness. So whatever we do to anyone else, we're doing to ourselves on the deepest level.
Yeah.
And, Jesus certainly affirmed that when he said, whatever you do to the least, you do to me.
And honest introspection is important, because it's too easy for somebody to hear the instructions, act humble, and people will think that you're spiritual, basically, or to interpret it that way. And but there was a book, traditional Jewish Kabbalah book, something about the way, I've forgotten the title, but it talks about how the false pride or false humility is like a straw house, or like a barn filled with straw that's disguised as a regular house. People will think that it's a regular house until one day some holes wear into the wall and the straw starts poking through, and then people will see it and say, oh, it's a straw house disguised as a regular house. And that's the way it is with false humility. And so, yeah, I think that the thing is, it's like one extra step that sometimes people forget to take, and it's like not malevolent, it's almost innocent, that they think, oh, humility, okay, act humble. And this isn't just magicians or people on the path, this is just people who go to church when they're growing up. They hear they're supposed to be humble, so they think, okay, I'm the most humble, I'm very humble, and one of my character traits is that I'm humble. I'll write on my resume that I'm humble, but then they never actually introspect and find humility. And when they do, it'll be such a relief, because the thing that they've been hanging on to has been holding them back and holding them down. And then if they can actually release it, and oh, I don't care if anybody remembers me after I die. Oh, I don't care if anybody's thinking about me right now. Like it's such a relief, to the genuine humility versus the appearance of humility. Because the appearance of humility, you're constantly looking. Do you see how humble I am? Do you see? Are you impressed? You're impressed, right?
Well, one thing that teaches us humility is when we see the dark side of our personality.
Shadow
we see how screwed up. We see how screwed up we are.
Yeah.
And it humbles us. Something Thomas Keating said that I've treasured is that humility is an attitude of honesty towards reality. And the reality is we are totally dependent on our divine source for everything.
Yeah. So what time is it? It's evening for you, right? Oh, the sun. That's the sun, isn't it? Behind you. Wow.
It's getting to be time for me to have dinner, but it's about 8:30 here now.
Wow, and still sun beaming in through the window. Is that
it'll be light out until close to midnight.
Wow.
And then it'll be light out again at 4 a.m.
That's so interesting.
It is.
That's fun. Well, I suppose we can probably wrap this up. What do you think? Do you have any final thoughts?
Sure, that sounds good to me. I think we ought to do it again before too long.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, let's do that. We'll do it after some time, when you finish this book that you're working on, or
my publisher, the man who was my publisher, passed away.
Oh.
January. So I don't know how I'm going to find a publisher yet, but
okay.
I'm not pursuing that. But if you hear of any possibilities,
I will, and I'll put that out there. I'll just tell you this much right now. I'm speaking to he's actually been on the Esoterinerd podcast, but I won't say his name. A comic book illustrator. And I'm hoping to turn my 37-page story into a 150-page graphic novel, if he's interested. Great. Yeah, I think that'd be really nice. But we'll see how it goes. So yeah, if anybody out there knows publishers, check out Kess's. You can find a link to all of his books. You can see where he's coming from and his bio. If you are a publisher, or if you know a publisher, I know there's probably a few people here who work at Llewellyn, or know people who do. How do you feel about Llewellyn? Are they okay? Penguin Publishing, they're okay? Well, anyway,
Sure. I
yeah,
mean, anybody that's willing to do this,
yeah. Contact
it's a
me, and I'll
serious,
get you
it's a
through to
serious
Kess.
book.
Yeah.
It's a serious book that's addressing contemporary issues and the mystery of our spiritual growth, and through the approach of oneness and universal spirituality. So I'm gonna, on my plan anyway, I've got around 60,000 words already, but
Mm.
my plan is to use various traditions as examples of this path.
In sort of a reminds me of Joseph Campbell a little bit, the hero of 1,000 faces.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, I've been getting some really good inspiration and surprises, and I've got a kind of a visionary poem at the beginning
Mm.
of the book, which in a way it outlines what the book is covering in much more detail.
Very nice.
Maybe
Very
next time we
Shakespearean.
get together, if you like, I could read that to you on this
Absolutely.
broadcast.
Definitely, we'll do that. And I'll probably be
Yeah.
back at home in Candlelim when we do our next one. I
Yeah,
had to do this outside so everybody could see the beautiful nature here.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The poem is called "The Fire of Longing Summoning the Soul."
Do you want to read it now?
Well, I'd have to hunt it up.
Oh, we'll do it next time. We'll do it next time.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll print it out and then I'll have it ready to read.
Okay. And I'll send you Thomas and the Wolf. That's my story. And we'll be in touch.
Oh, please do. I'm going to have surgery for a hernia
Oh boy.
on the 15th.
Okay, everybody send light to Kess on the 15th. Everybody send rose
Yeah,
crosses.
healing light.
Rose cross, Yeshua. Good.
So that's gonna knock me down a bit, the surgeon said.
Ooh, yeah, for a little while.
For a while.
Well, you look healthy.
Yeah, I am. I still have major mobility issues, but aside from that, I'm doing really good.
That's good. Good to see you.
It's going to make my mobility issues worse.
For a little
Because
while?
I use my, not permanently, but I use my arms and my upper body a lot to get around with a walker and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's going to put stress on the places where they do the incisions.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to make more painful. That's what she told me. I'm getting the least invasive, so it's robotic. But they go in, in your stomach, below the belly button and stuff. I've had some anxiety about it.
Yeah.
But I've got to remember, life's an act of faith, right?
Yeah. Sounds like some interesting Swadhisthana karma or something. Is that Swadhisthana? Below the belly button.
Yeah, I think it is. It's not the root chakra. It's
no, that's the furnace my dad used to. I think he
furnace, yes.
I think he was coming from at the time Andrew was his teacher, so it was like combining Chinese medicine with chakras a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's raining here. I was hoping it would while I was recording.
Oh, your monsoons are coming, huh?
Yeah, it's just starting. Oh, so good. This is the best part of Goa.
Well, you look like you've got a good tan, Edward.
Oh yeah. Oh, I think it might be the lighting, because it's
maybe it is.
Yeah, I'm backlit here. I have this but it's not much for to try to light me up. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I look tan. That's nice.
Well, it's been really good visiting and talking about these favorite topics of ours.
Absolutely.
And there's more we can do. And if any of your viewers have anything they'd like us to talk about or questions or comments, invite them to give them to you, and then we can address them the next time we get together.
Absolutely. The people who are seeing our faces right now are watching this through YouTube. So for those of you watching this through YouTube, go ahead and comment below, and you will see that, or I'll see that, and I can contact Kess. I don't think you do much YouTubing, but I'll if they have a question for you, I'll forward it to you.
Are we on YouTube now, or are we going
No,
to-
we will be in a couple of days.
Okay.
Whoa.
Great.
Oh, it's such perfect timing with the rain. It's really coming down now. Okay, brother. Thank you.
All right. Well, have wonderful meditations and much love and peace to you and to everybody who's in the spirit. And we all need to pray for our world so that it heals.
Absolutely. Okay.
Amen. Well, thanks a lot, Edward.
Thank you very much.
We'll be in touch.
We'll be in touch. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kess Frey, for being my guest today on the Esoterinerd podcast, and just for being here. And I look forward to our next conversation. Special thanks to Susumu Ueda and his father and the other monks at Jofuku in Temple on Mount Koyasu for the music I hear right now. Special thanks to Camille and Kennerly for whichever harp melody I chose for the intro and outro to the interview itself. I haven't done that yet, so it'll be as much of a surprise to me as it was to you. Did I do that? Again, just a reminder, if you've listened to this whole episode, maybe you might be interested in the content at the VH Friday BT YouTube page, as well as the travel series on the Adytum YouTube page. Basically, the BT stuff is who I used to be, and the travel series is the process by which I became who I am now. So if you're interested in that, because there might be a little bit of a disconnect between me being the host, producer, and so on of the Esoterinerd podcast, but also being kind of detached and apart from in a parallel dimension to it, or at least what it sort of was. Thank you all for tuning in. Kabsam Pekt, Kongsong Pax, light in extension. Welcome, and thank you again for sitting all the way through to the end. If you did indeed sit all the way through to the end, and you haven't yet, I would beseech thee to subscribe. Is it here? Subscribe? And I won't go so far as to ask you to click the notification bell. If you could like the video, it'd be very nice. I won't go so far as to ask you to comment, but all of those things help. But if you don't mind, just taking a moment, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you want to help me out, I don't have a Patreon page. I'm not trying to make money off this thing, but I think it'd be nice to trick the algorithm into recommending my channel and this content that people discuss on my channel to more people.